Hi guys, Oliver here. As you've seen in the intro, today I would like to guide you through the process of how I created this composite image here of a Milky Way over Windmills. I created this a few weeks ago on a rainy weekend, and people were asking if I could make a video tutorial about it. Yeah, today's the day. Let's do it. Before we start, what was actually the reason that led me to do that composite? Well, it's pretty simple. What I had was this shot here of what I think beautiful Milky Way. It's been taken earlier this year in South Wales, and it is actually a stack of 9 consecutive shots. It's been stacked in with Sequitur on a PC, and that really helps to bring out some detail and reduce noise. But as you also can see, apart from the Milky Way, there is nothing of any sort of interest in that. There is no foreground, there is absolutely nothing. So I was thinking, with what could I actually combine it? And I remember that early last year, we went to the Netherlands. And what shouts more Netherlands like their iconic windmills? What we have here is quite a set of windmills from Skans, however the Dutch pronounce it, I'm sorry. As you can see, it's all very flat, there is no light, there is no color, but we do have some really beautiful structures. And I decided I want to take this windmill shot here as the basis to blend the Milky Way and night sky in. And how we're doing it is, what we're guiding you through today. So let's get into action. Glasses first, very important at my age. What we're doing, I am selecting both shots, the windmills and the Milky Way in Lightroom. Right click, edit in, and open it as layers in Photoshop. This is what I did here. We have Photoshop, one project. The Milky Way, I decided to have it on top, and the windmill on the bottom. When I make the Milky Way visible and invisible, you can already see the windmill is right in the way. So let's arrange them first. To do that, I simply reduce the opacity of the Milky Way. 60%, quite right. And let's start with the bottom layer. We're moving that around, and you see, whatever I do with the windmill is pretty much always right in where the galactic center of the Milky Way is, right where we don't want it. The solution to that is actually pretty simple. I select that layer and create a transform selection, free transform, Ctrl T, and we flip it horizontal. We can already see that gives us way more options to actually position them where it suits us. So I'd say something like that, not too much of the foreground, because the Milky Way is, to me, the actual highlight and the star of it. And now we're positioning the Milky Way. Something like that, and that we're not using too much flesh here on the left side. Creating a transform selection again, this time for the Milky Way, and I simply enlarge it. Yes, something like that. Reposition it completely. I want to be careful about that bottom part here where we had a lot of light pollution on the Gower in South Wales. I don't want to have too much of that, but I don't want to lose too much of the actual galactic center. And I think that position here, that will work. The wing of the windmill here, right in the Milky Way, here in the Milky Way. I think that looks alright. Going back to 100% opacity here. And now the task is to blend the Milky Way into the image here. Normally, when I start blending, I simply use my set of luminosity masks. where to get these actions, how to use them, the basics, I show you that in another video, and I put the link in the description down there. For now, so let's simply create the luminosity masks and see what's going to happen. Okay, my PC decides to be a little slow today, but here they are. Good. Next step, we are making the Milky Way visible, the layer again, but we are adding a black layer mask. Black layer mask, you know, makes it invisible again. Next step, we're choosing our brightest luminosity mask by control click on it. Going to our Milky Way layer, choosing a brush tool in white 100% to see what we're actually doing, just painting it in here. And when I now zoom in, you see a difficulty, and that is the selection itself does have a lot of bright parts, and all these bright parts the Milky Way will become visible. So we actually need to reduce these bright parts. Just make sure the dark parts, the dark bits of the wings are properly selected and not overwritten by the Milky Way when we are blending it in. So the solution to that is pretty simple. We have no selection. I make this here invisible. And now we're simply using an adjustment layer, in that case our levels, and what I want to achieve is a very high contrasty, almost black and white image of our base layer, the Milky Way. So for now here the background is really white and our darks are really dark, and the mid-tones reduce them as well, not too much. Good. What we see now here, we have something here in the top right corner as well as the bottom. That is for now not relevant for what we actually want to select. And bear in mind, this levels adjustment layer here is just an intermediate layer that helps us creating the masks the way we want it. What I'm going to do, I delete the masks I've created previously. Going back to our base layer, but this time with our levels adjustment layer visible, and simply create these masks again. And when I again now choose the brights one, you see it's really pretty much a black and white image. This is what's left. So we're making our levels layer invisible, or deleted even, because it has done its job. We're making the Milky Way visible. Well, it's not really visible because we already have a black layer mask on it. Selecting the mask for better visual, I make the selection just invisible. It's still active, just invisible with Control H. And now we're painting over it. That bit here. Zooming in. And the result looks actually, I'd say, way better than before, but still we do have some of these white bits here, and that comes because it wasn't really monochrome binary enough. There are still bright bits which are shining through. Okay, so we can't use that either. The way to overcome it is a simple modification of our selection. So we have the brights one layer, we activate it, and now we modify our selection. And what we do, we expand it, but we only expand it by one single pixel. That's what I'm doing right now. Going back to our Milky Way and paint into the layer mask like this. Just paint over it, make the selection invisible and zoom in. And this time the result looks, yes, I would call that exactly as I would like to have it. We have clear structures here. We have no unnecessary bright bits in these fine structures here. We have lost a little detail, that is true. We have lost it by expanding the mask. So we are basically blending out some of these very, very fine structures. But bear in mind, we are here on a 100% zoom already, and trust me, even when you print it out in a rather large format, you won't see it at the end. Good. Now that I have decided that I'm happy with that, I simply continue the process and paint with our Bright Swan layer mask, still selected. Paint over all the bits where I want to have the Milky Way visible. Good, let's make that a little larger. Make our brush tool smaller. That's gonna help us in certain areas, like for example if you look at this here, the window, because the window of these window frames here are very bright parts and we have the bright bits of the entire image selected. We would make the Milky Way shine through these windows. Well, it's not an open structure, so by doing it this way here, I just make sure I have the Milky Way only where I basically want it. Let's move it a little. These bits here, yeah, there's gonna be a little imperfection. These parts, and I continue throughout. You see what happens here throughout this part of the image. I do not want to have the bottom part where the water is selected or blended in, because we're gonna need that for later to put in the reflection, and it's actually helping us when we're not having it painted in or blended in. I can brush tool a little bigger and carry on throughout the entire image. Everywhere where I want to have a Milky Way visible, I paint over it, zoom out, and to make sure that we really have the entire image, everything selected, by alt-clicking the layer mask, I make it visible, and yeah, these structures look pretty clean to me now. Exactly as we want it. Alt-click on it again to make the image visible. And next step, I am with Ctrl D, I am deselecting our selection, because we still have a few imperfections, but now we cannot really select it with layer masks. We have to do it manually, and what I mean are pieces like, if I zoom in closer here in this windmill for example, you see that the structure is shining, no, the sky is shining through the structure. It doesn't make much sense, and the way to sort it is brush tool, black color. We are simply making sure what we've blended in using our mask will now be blended out again. All these parts where the Milky Way is shining through but it shouldn't, like here in the window, you see that here in the structures and the frames, this stuff here, there should not be a Milky Way visible, and I simply blend it out. We have a very obvious part here, these, what is it, wooden things to whatever, attach ropes, how you call it, what's the English word for it? German I would call it puller, but anyway, so just making these visible. Just to complete it, we have another difficulty, and that's here, these trees in the background. It's, well, look at this, we are already at 300% zoom in, but these structures, they don't look nice, and I just want to make sure, because they are not adding anything to the image itself. I just change to white because I just overlay it with some parts of the Milky Way. Same here. Doesn't add to the image, it's not necessary. Going back to black, making that what should be visible of the structure, making that visible. So I'm taking a little time, go through the image and basically clean it up. The more time you spend on these little details in a 300% view, the better the result will be. And I'm running through it, but I speed it up because you don't want to wait the entire time for that. Good. Once I'm finally happy with the result and all these little manual corrections, there is still one major flaw. I mean, if you look here at the left side of the windmill structure, and I make the Milky Way invisible, you see, oops, we've lost some bits of our windmill. How do we get them back? First of all, I am creating another adjustment layer using the levels again, and this time yeah, making sure I'm really getting these bits here, yeah, something like that, and we're zooming into a windmill. And to me the easiest way of making them or regaining them using my quick selection tool, something like this here. That looks alright, and I'm also adding this little bit here, going back to our Milky Way layer, brush tool, and no, because the Milky Way, the sky, is visible. This time we want to make it invisible, but obviously we're not painting into a selection, we're painting into a layer mask. So always be careful which layer you're painting in, and whether in the layer itself or in the mask. So here we're getting it back. There it is, our windmill structure. Yep, fantastic. And these bits here, no, not these, but these bits. I want to have my windmill back. And here is it. And deselect it, delete the levels layer. And yes, here are our bits of the missing windmill. Good. So far, so good. We have a windmill, and I think we've pretty cleanly blended the sky in. The next thing I am not happy with is these backgrounds here. From the original image, if you look at this, it was all still very bright, and it lacks a little, yeah, how to say, yeah, contrast. Basically, what I do, so I select our base layer, add an adjustment layer, adding contrast and reducing the brightness here until I am happy just with this area down here on the horizon line and the right, because I only want to blend in this bit here. So what I'm doing now, I invert it so the modifications are not visible. And this time I am not selecting the brights, but I'm selecting the darks. Yeah, let's select these darks too here. And white color our brush, simply paint in the bits I want to darken. Only this here. Yes, and I also think the left hand side here is a little dark too, is a little bright too. I want to darken that as well. Good, it looks pretty homogeneous so far. That's alright. What we can do now, we are making the entire windmill part a little brighter. Yep, a bit like that. I would also like to change the saturation. Let's try the masters first. I want to have the greens a little more intense. Not too much, just like that for now. And you see, this is how layers work in Photoshop, because these layers are above our base layer, but not above our Milky Way layer. Only the base layer, so the background, the Milky Way, etc. will be affected. Yeah, let's try to change the colors a little. Make it a little more green, not too much. Maybe getting, yes, into the yellow to have it a little warmer. And I'm actually quite happy with that. Next up, now the Milky Way, for my taste, is a little contrasty. Let's try to take the contrast out. Maybe make it a little brighter. But I only want to have the Milky Way, and because our adjustment layer is on top of everything, I just clip it to the underlying layer. And with that here, only the Milky Way will be affected and not the windmills themselves. Yeah, a bit like that, but the contrast out. Quite happy with that. So, it looks quite alright so far, I personally think. What is missing is now the bottom part, the reflection brights, because such a fantastic Milky Way actually shouts for reflection, doesn't it? Because I'm happy with what we've achieved so far, what I'm doing is I am flattening the entire image. So all our adjustment layers, our different layers, the windmill and the sky themselves, are flattened together into one single layer. Next step, what I also do is I delete the luminance masks we've created earlier, because they were meant to select mainly the fine structures in the windmill. Now we need to have the bottom part in it. So we're simply creating a new set of luminance masks based on the image we're seeing right now. Can only be that image because there's only one layer left at the moment. In the next step, I'm simply duplicating the layer. You remember, Ctrl T creates a transform mask, and this time we're flipping it again, but this time vertically. This is what happens. Now we're going to align our mirrored, our reflected Milky Way. When I'm happy with the alignment, we need to make sure we are only putting the bottom part here into the image. What I'm doing, opacity back to 100% to have an exact duplicate of what we had here. And now, because we've already created our selection before we duplicated the layer, let's see, what are we taking? Let's start with the Brights 3, black layer mask first, and then I choose my selection. The white brush tool, and let's see what we're doing. So here's our bottom. Not too overly happy with the result of our selection, so maybe we should include some more of the bright parts. So let's choose Brights 2. And you see, selection is getting bigger, gently blending in our sky into our fake reflection. Oh, what a word, fake. Well, while I'm finishing this process here, word to fake, I personally think it's not fake. As long as you're making clear what you're doing here is digital art, nobody ever needs to shout the word fake. I know some people are pretty quick doing it, but no. To me, that is digital art. It is a composite image. Of course, I would never ever claim that this is really what I've seen, or even straight out of camera. No, it's not my world. So, and the blend does actually not look too bad here. I'm quite happy. Let's zoom in a little and see what we've done. It's a nice reflection. Obviously the reflection of the main windmill here, that doesn't fit, but I think for now we can ignore it. But when we're looking at that reflection now a little more, it really shouts fake. This is never how a reflection like this would look like. Two things to bear in mind, or two things I'm going to do. The blend's quite alright. Now, only for that layer here, we're adding a little blur. We're using a filter. Using a blur filter and a motion blur, I think, as horizontal to imitate some waves. Maybe, let's see, a distance of about 42 pixel. See how it looks like. Yes, actually I am pretty happy with the result here at the bottom. And what happened now, because we've applied that blur filter to the layer we were using for the reflection only, nothing else in the image is affected, only that bottom layer. And now we're making it a little darker, but again not the entire image, only that bottom part here, making the reflection a little darker to make it look a little more natural, maybe a little more contrasty even. Good, and yeah, maybe making it even a little darker like that. Basically you play around with it until you're happy with the result. For now I think we can leave it like that. Again, we flatten the image because now we don't need layers anymore. We're cropping it in a little. I would like to keep the original ratio. Just these corners here, which are not really very clean. Something like that. Cropping it. Yes, looking at that final result, surprisingly it pretty much looks like my first attempt. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with it. Good. There is one more thing. You know the saying that many ways lead to Rome. I personally think this is nowhere more accurate than working in Photoshop. There are so many different options and different ways to achieve a result. I today chose a way where I tried to not overcomplicate things, basically not to confuse you. On the downside, it is a little more manual work, but when you're in Photoshop and when you are watching this part of the video still, and you certainly are, then you know what kind of a satisfying process it is to create a piece of digital art like this one. Well, at least for me it is. So don't take it as a strict guideline and the only rule to achieve these results here. Use it as inspiration, play around with different options and get inspired, start Photoshop and do some of your own composite images. Yes, why don't you use the comment section to put some links in to your favorite work. I would really like to see what you've done after watching this video. And we're at the end for today. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye for now. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon.